Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson and Michael Grumbine.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Although
Merry Christmas.
We are recording this before Christmas, but I guess that means that by this time you're listening to Christmas music, right?
Exactly. When you all hear this, it will actually be the real Christmas season, which will be the week after Christmas, 2 weeks after Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like summer, right? Summer starts on a day, and then you experience all of it. You don't just celebrate summer on the day of summer, and then
you're getting it. You're getting it.
Oh,
it's fantastic.
All this time spent with you is changing,
rubbing off, sadly,
for the better.
Just don't grow a beard.
No.
I'm showing you what not to do. I'm a
my kids won't let me. No, I'm not allowed to. I've wanted to, but I'm just not allowed to. All right, everybody. Hey, we're here, and we're going through more changes from the Lord of the Rings films by Peter Jackson. We're doing number 23 and 24 today. Party changes, or party time. I kind of like that, right? Because there's so many little changes to the party that we're not going to go through every single little one. Originally, I thought we were going to do that, but then Michael and I talked, and we realized that would be incredibly stupid because the amount of time we'd spend on like, hey, look, there's no tent around the party tree. And then spend like 10 minutes talking about, no, we're just going to go through the party changes and talk about how Peter Jackson changed that. And then we're going to talk about this one bigger change, which is the 17 years are lost. 17 years between the party and Gandalf leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back. And then Bill and Frodo finally leaving the Shire to set out on his quest. That's 17 years in the book, but it's no time in the movies. So we'll talk about that. Before we do, if you're enjoying this, guys, hey, give us a like, a rating, a 5-star bump on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. We'd appreciate that. Yeah, helps people find it. Our subscribers, listeners go up pretty much every month, and we'd like to get more. And it's really fun to have interactions and get comments on YouTube and comments on Discord and emails and all those places. And so the more folks listen to us, the more fun it is for us too. So yeah, throw us that 5-star rating. We really appreciate it. And
if you don't have 5 stars, address all the hate mail to me.
Mm-hmm.
I will carefully peruse it.
michaelhatestolkien@gmail.com.
That's right. I bet you that's not taken.
You're probably right. But you never know. You know what's not taken, though, is your membership to theonering.com. If you want to get the extended podcast, you can become a member at theonering.com/members. It's $4 a month. The first month is free, and you get to hear us talk about in more detail why Frodo wasn't celebrated for his birthday in the films, and maybe what was some of the reasoning around that. We'll talk more about the 17 years and what would have happened had they kept that in the films, because that might have been weird. Anyway, we'll talk about all that in more detail. You can join us listening to that by going to theonering.com/members, and don't worry, you'll get it in your podcast. And people call them podcatchers. I remember that from a while back, and I still can't get that out of my head. Like from your podcast app, you can listen to it there. You can get it in YouTube. We also send out a newsletter, and we link it in Discord every week whenever it goes up. And it always goes up early on YouTube. So check it out, theonering.com/member. So Michael, I think, and real fast, next year, we're actually going to be going back into Tolkien early in the year. We're going to be reading some other stories. I'm not going to say which one yet because it might change, but I don't believe it's going to be 2 of us. I believe we'll be back to a full complement. Our 3-legged stool, which I like to say sometimes. So,
dear old Dan, we'll be back for a little bit anyway.
Dan. We'll have some more big thoughts. Once again, we haven't had any in the last few months, so he'll be back. All right, everybody, here we go.
Thoughts are small. Speaking of small thoughts, we're gonna talk about a Hobbit party, which is full of lots of small things.
Yes, because it's gonna be party time.
Go on, Sam. Ask Rosie for a dance. Go on.
No, the big one.
Bilbo!
There's been a dragon of these parts for 1,000 years. I regret to announce this is the end. Goodbye.
that montage just kind of gives you an idea of a lot of the little things that were changed in the film. And in fact, one that kind of wasn't, looking back at it, just because I felt like I had to put it in there. And that would be, in my opinion, the fireworks. The fireworks are really close to what Tolkien wrote. The dragon, the spears going over the water with the hissing sound. I think he says fireworks turns into birds, I want to say, and in here it's more
Right.
like but yeah, he kept it really
He
close.
has a whole paragraph describing the different fireworks. There's a it's, I really liked actually the way it makes sense if you think about it, right? Because you have a movie, and what works best in a movie is visuals, and so fireworks being highly visual, and audio, I guess. So they really did a good job, and there are a couple other places they did a good job. So maybe we can break it down and just go through real quick the party in the film versus the party in the books. And so the part in general, I have to say off the top, Jackson did a pretty good job. And there are a number of elements that I think you'll see that were missing, and I think would have made a fantastic addition to the movie. So we could talk a little bit about that. But essentially, here's the way it works in the film. And by the way, just to be clear, I'm going to say there's two elements I'm going to add at the end that were in the extended edition, but we're not generally talking about the extended edition. But I thought they were funny. So. In the film, we have the element of the general merriment of basically the party scenes themselves, and it takes place out on the green underneath the big party tree. We lack a lot of the tents. There are some tents set up, but notably in the books, there's a tent over the entire tree. There's a tent that's so massive it covers the entire party tree, and that's where the private party with Bilbo's speech is had. In the movie, he gives the speech to everybody, but in the books, he gives the speech just to the 144 close family members.
Here's the quote directly from the book about the party tree. Tolkien wrote, "There was a specially large pavilion so big that the tree that grew in the field was right inside it and stood proudly near one end at the head of the chief table." So there were chief tables. It was much more of a whole setup rather than
right. There was and by the way, the party in the book was an all-day affair. It covered 3 meals: lunch, afternoon tea, and supper. And in the movie, it's just at night. The movie has the scene with Sam and Rosie where we're given a little more tidbits about Sam's, and I think it's a whole setup for the arc with Sam over the books, which Tolkien has almost nothing about, and Jackson wanted to put more in. It's quite likely that Rosie was in fact at the party, because almost everyone in Hobbiton was at the party. So that's and most people from the Shire, many people from the Shire, there are probably over 1,000 guests total, maybe more. And so anyway, we have Sam and Rosie as an addition in the films. Gandalf and his fireworks, very well done. He shows off his fireworks for the children at one point in the movie, and then of course there's the fireworks over the water with the dragon. And the dragon, as Jonathan mentioned, is almost exactly the way it's portrayed in the book. Although in the book, the dragon starts at the Lonely Mountain, like there's a firework of building up black smoke, Lonely Mountain, and then the dragon comes out of the Lonely Mountain smoke, which is pretty cool. In the movie, Bilbo tells Hobbit tales, tales from the Hobbit about the trolls to children, and Jonathan didn't have a clip about that, but it was in the movie edition. He's telling the story, and there's some super cute kids, Hobbit kids, that are there. It doesn't specifically say that in the book, but Bilbo is greeting everyone all day long, and he's giving presents. So one of the things the movie left out entirely, which I thought was sad, was the Hobbit tradition of giving presents. So Bilbo actually spends basically most of the day until the supper greeting every single guest that comes through the special white gate that they've made for the party. They do massive landscaping, and he gives everyone a gift. And it says specifically that the children spent most of the afternoon just playing with their toys, and that were gifts, of which many were clearly magical. And in the book, we are also told that dwarves came before in the weeks before the party and brought carts of stuff, probably these magical toys and other gifts from the Lonely Mountain, and probably some of Gandalf's fireworks and stuff. In the movie, we have the speech, which everything in the speech in the movie everything is word for word from the books. Now the book speech is longer; he says more things, but everything that is in that the movie has is in the books, including the famous scene with well, not the famous, but this quirky scene with the patriarch of the Proudfoot clan, and who has his feet up on the table and yells a proud feet when Bilbo is it, which actually exactly happened as Tolkien described it in the books. So well done to Jackson on that one. And then in the movie, in the extended edition, doesn't have it in the theatrical, we have him dodging the Sackville Bagginses and talking to Frodo and almost telling Frodo about the fact that he's going away. Now, what's funny about that, even though I like the extended edition in general, is that highlights another difference with the book. Because in the book, there was Frodo was in on it. He knew what Bilbo was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Gandalf was in on it. He knew what Bilbo was going to do. So they both knew what was going to happen. And so the extended edition with Bilbo almost telling Frodo that he's going away, but not doing so while they're dodging Sackville Bagginses, would have never happened in the book at all. And then there's one line from the extended edition, which I found hilarious because it touched my heart, where Bilbo is greeting people as they enter the party, and he makes a comment about productive brace girdles. He talks to a hobbit mother and says, "Are all these yours? You've been productive."
Oh, that's
which I thought was hilarious because, of course, that reminded me of my family. Yes, we are
very productive.
We are indeed productive. So, other differences: the universal gift giving, the mountain. Okay, the dwarves. I think I covered most of them. So 3 meals instead of 4, and then the party itself, party within the party. That's the big deal. Is that where Bill gives the speech and all the stuff with his family happens inside of the massive tent right under the tree, while the rest of Hobbiton is basically outside at the bigger party. So most of the hobbits don't actually hear his speech; just his family and relations hear his speech. They hear about it.
But the other additional change it's an addition is Merry and Pippin at the party, right?
Correct. And we already talked about that in one of our previous books, the addition of Merry and Pippin. It was, in fact, somewhat likely that they could have been there. It's likely that Frodo's Brandy Buck relations were probably invited. But, of course, Pippin would have been 10 years old at that point. Right. So they would not have looked the way they looked. And that goes to the 17-year gap as well, where Jackson just doesn't have the 17-year gap, which we'll talk about later. One final change, Gandalf being in on Bilbo's plan gives the hobbits something to talk about for years, as he says, by creating a blinding flash when Bilbo disappears. So it isn't awkward the way it is in the movie, where all the hobbits are like, yeah, he literally just disappeared in front of our eyes, which would be, but there's a blinding flash from Gandalf and then Bilbo's gone, which could first of all, the blame goes on Gandalf for that, and he's running cover for Bilbo in the books in that regard.
I found that honestly the weirdest part of all the changes made to the party was that there was no flash. I was expecting something, and for him to just disappear, and for Gandalf to his face kind of goes like boom, almost like he's saying pow or something like that. Like his lips make this little, and it's almost like they filmed it with the idea that he was going to do something, but then decided to remove it. And so the first time I saw that, I was like, oh, he was supposed to do something, but they decided not to. And I can't get that out of my head. And so the idea that he just disappears without it, I like the blinding flash of light because it adds a little bit more, the queer things happening with Bilbo, and it's more than just disappearing. There's a little bit of magic, and that was my least favorite part of the changes to the party. The rest of it is mostly cosmetic, and the rest of it has to do with it being a cinematic, and we'll talk about the 17 years that they lopped off for the film. But you wanted to introduce the characters, their relationships as early as possible without it being overwhelming, like here's everybody, but here's the characters of Merry and Pippin. How do we introduce them as sort of the comic relief for the films? Well, make them the comic relief for those 30 seconds in the
introducing them in general, like like this is our introduction to Merry and Pippin,
exactly,
instead of being on the road. So
right. So and then the other change is that we kind of lopped or stuck onto this whole idea of the party changes is how Frodo or how Bilbo leaves, in the sense that he just drops the ring down, he just plops it on the floor, and then Frodo comes in and finds it. But before that, Bilbo just leaves. He just leaves with it on the floor and doesn't hand it to Gandalf or anything like that, or Gandalf doesn't save it. And granted, I think it makes the struggle more real, because that same struggle he did have in the books, when it comes to, he did not want to leave it was still in his pocket. He didn't want to leave the envelope.
Most of that happens aside from Gandalf's reaction, where Gandalf, basically says, you probably think you're quite clever, or something like that. Something to that effect, which he never says in the books, because of course in the books he's in on it. Instead, they discuss the blinding flash in the books, and Bilbo complains about the blinding flash, actually, unlike Jonathan. So there's I think there's a, like you're saying, Jonathan, Jackson is trying to put in a lot of content into a few minutes, which he kind of has to do throughout this, because he's trying to get everything in. And so he uses that opportunity to show sort of the malicious, or at least, sort of foretelling of the doom element of the ring. Just giving that sense of foreboding about the ring by having it hit the ground with far greater weight than it would have.
Right.
And the whispering of the ring, which we've talked about before, and we actually like the whispering. There's a lot of things happening, but the general conversation between Gandalf and Bilbo is exactly like it is in the book. The book, of course, again, has more than the movie does, but most of that element, most of the elements of Gandalf talking to Bilbo are exactly from the book.
Yeah, I mean, even Bilbo drops the envelope on the floor, and then but Gandalf picks it up. But in the film, he decides not to pick it up because he sees the eye for a split second, and doesn't.
And that leads, and that actually deals with our 17-year jump, which we'll talk more about that.
Okay, so let's get into our questions then. Is it lore friendly? And I want to say, this idea of the Shire for Jackson is the thing that he loved. I think he loved doing the Shire more than anything else. I mean, they grew the Shire for 2 years, I think it was, or a year and a half, something like that. They actually went to the location, built it, and then let everything grow where they needed it to grow in order to actually have a lived-in set.
Which is genius. Yep.
Which was genius and made it look good. And so this party, the introduction to the hobbits, to Hobbit culture, to hobbits. I mean, we had the little bit of the prosaic introduction, but this introduction where they're interacting, where we get to know the characters, right? You could still feel like there's, I don't know, he certainly understood hobbits more than any other characters, I would say, in the books, and that comes through in how it's portrayed. Right. All right, so the party, is it lore friendly?
Or the changes? We're specifically talking about the changes.
So the changes being the party tree, the tent around the party tree, some of the changes to Bilbo's speech being removed, with Merry and Pippin there, with Bilbo talking to the kids, right? All that sort of, with removing the giving of the gifts, with not having Frodo's birthday there, which isn't really something we talked about much, but we'll talk about more in the extended podcast. All that sort of stuff. Does it make it lore friendly? I'm having a hard time with this one.
Well, so I what I did in this question, I'll tell you my answer. My answer is yes, it is lore friendly. Here's why. He wants to introduce the characters to us in a way, and the Merry and Pippin friendship with each other is a lore friendly element. He's introducing it in a way. He's inventing something to shoehorn it in, so he doesn't have to take up more screen time on the road. And so I understand why he's doing it. It's not lore unfriendly. It's Sam and Rosie, same thing. Sam and Rosie are clearly, they have some sort of relationship. Isn't like Sam comes back and immediately gets married randomly. So there's going to be some attraction at least, and probably a kind of relationship that's lore friendly. The dodging the Sackville Baggins is lore friendly. The various elements, slight differences in the now the leaving out is the biggest part that I was like, okay, struggling with that. Leaving out the birthday, is that lore friendly? Well, no, that part isn't technically lore friendly. Technically, when you miss out on something like that, it's not lore friendly. But overall, the changes in the party were not lore against the lore. They were in line with the lore of Tolkien. They just weren't as good as they could have been. I think, for example, having mountains of letters, showing a shot with mountains of letters in the post office at Hobbiton would have been awesome. Like you could having Frodo's relationship, like him ham-fast Gamgee's discussion in the ivy bush
Yeah.
with the miller and with Sandyman and a couple of the other hobbits, explaining how Frodo's an orphan. I thought that could have been cool if they had done that in the extended edition, even a minute and a half of that. Telling. There's a lot of things they left out, but I don't think it's lore unfriendly. So in the end, I land on it was lore friendly. It wasn't lore unfriendly. It was just shortened.
I think there's an easier argument to be made that when you simply leave something out, that's more lore friendly than adding something new in, right?
Right.
So omission is more lore friendly than addition.
That's true.
And though, you could say there were letters that went out, they just didn't have time to show all the letters that went out there. You could have said, maybe we just removed the parts that weren't Frodo's birthday. It didn't say they didn't. It would have been lore unfriendly, for instance, to say explicitly this was not Frodo's birthday, or it was a small event, right? That would have been lore unfriendly, but they didn't even address that. So yeah, I'm going to go with you and say it was lore friendly. And some of the other changes about Merry and Pippin's age, particularly Pippin, that's I guess lore unfriendly, but we already addressed that in another one, so I'm not.
We're not talking about that specifically. We're talking about the overall. And in the end, when we're talking about an overall subject with a number of changes, we have to make a judgment. In general, does it fall on the side of lore friendly more or lore more unfriendly?
All right. So next one, does the change make for better cinema? I think this one's pretty easy. I think yes, it does. You don't want a big, giant, long extend. If I can make my Y capital here, that'd be great. Introducing the characters, I think there was necessary for cinema. I think you want to know who they are right away, and that there's a relationship there. It creates a fellowship more immediately. It bookends Sam and Rosie from the beginning to the end, and I think that's something that is the Sam and Rosie scene in the theatrical edition. I think so. It's been a long time since I've watched it.
Yes. No, okay. I made a point because I only watched the extended edition, so I made a point of hunting down the theatrical edition just to watch. Because I want to Sam and Rosie is in the theatrical edition.
Yeah, I think they could have done things that would have been made for better long form television, perhaps if we had more hours to do this. But I think for cinema, I think it worked incredibly well. And I'll go back to the Shire is the best part of both the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. Obviously the Hobbit, but I think even the Lord of the Rings, the Shire is the best part.
No disagreement. I'm also a yes for the same reasons.
All right. Next one then. How much do you like the change?
Now this is an interesting one. Some of the changes I like. If you're looking at them from a change perspective, I don't actually like them that much because I would have rather them not leave out a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But since it's a movie, do I like the changes? I don't really like the changes, but they're not. It's funny. It's a funny situation because given our three questions, I'm going to score this one a little low as far as the changes because I think it was just missed opportunities. That's why I'm going to give it a lower score. But I still stand by my earlier answers that I don't think it's lore unfriendly. I think it's fairly lore friendly, and I also think it makes for better cinema. But I don't like the changes. For me, I'm going to give it a 2.3.
2.3. Wow, that is lower than I expected.
Because there's so much they could have, like the birthday presents thing. That would have been awesome, and showing the kids playing with these little magical birthday gifts. That would be cool, so cool. And the mountains of invitations, as I mentioned before, and having 3 meals. Like they could have done a cut scene where it shows Bilbo at the front greeting people in the morning, and then you do the time lapse of over the afternoon, where just boom, and you see the hobbits like partying, and they keep partying and more partying, and more food comes in, and then 5 seconds.
Wasn't there some hobbits who went back through the gate again to get a second?
Yes, to get a second
so, even that
round of gifts.
Like I could see this, if this were an episodic series on TV or on streaming now, where it ends with Frodo saying goodbye and disappearing, and then boom, then we get into the next episode like that. So you can imagine to have a whole hour or 45 minutes in order to spend on Hobbiton and the party.
Yeah, and you could do a lot of stuff that wasn't technically in the book and show like what would have happened and what would have been going on during that time, which would have been pretty cool.
So in
other words, you could have done the ham-fast conversation at the Ivy
right.
Bush at
Could
the
have,
party where he's
right.
telling stories to people about Bilbo's. Like you could have done more book stuff, and then you could have had more. We could have gotten to know and dislike Ted Sandyman a little more. We could have, there could be a lot of course, in a movie series, in a television series, we would end up with a scouring of the Shire, so we'd want to know about the Sandyman, the Sandyman family, etc. But anyway, this is all nerd stuff. So,
where do I want to rank this? I'm actually going to go higher than you on this because it doesn't bother me as much as other changes, and that's part of how I rank things right now. Is that
got it.
I think of like the visceral reaction that I had to say Arwen coming and saving Aragorn.
We haven't got there yet.
Things like that. And so this here, sure, I didn't like that there was no bright flash when Frodo disappeared or Bilbo disappeared. I didn't like that Gandalf saw the eye when he went to go pick up the ring. But it didn't bother me like other changes did. So I'm going to go 3.1. I'm okay with it. I think he performed. He showed us the Shire so well that I think
you're being merciful on the changes. All right, I accept that.
I am. As a whole, and he did so much where it was so close to what was actually written in the books with the fireworks and with Bilbo's speech, that I'm giving him some love there too.
I agree.
All right, guys, let's jump into the next one, guys. This is The 17 Years Are Gone.
He's gone, hasn't he?
Bilbo's ring. Keep it secret. Keep it safe. Here follows the account with Isildur, High King of Gondor. Is it secret? Is it safe?
17 years have passed in the books, and in the movies, we don't know how much time, in fact. They never really say at all, unless somebody has tried to figure it out. But it's a short amount of time between Gandalf leaving. I mean, it seems almost like it's overnight. There's a couple more scenes with orcs and things like that, but
right. I would say it's definitely months, but it isn't years.
Yeah.
Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin don't look hardly any different. They don't look any different at all.
No.
So not enough time for them to look different. Definitely not 17 years. So there's this whole issue of shortening, which now what's interesting about that is, in a way, Tolkien has actually been criticized for that element quite a bit. Now, do you have a quote that bears upon it?
Yeah. So here's the quote that happened. So at the end of the party, Gandalf has an inkling of something going on because of Frodo not leaving the ring, and Frodo says to him, or Bilbo not leaving the ring. Frodo says to him, "You're very mysterious. What are you afraid of?" And Gandalf responds and says, "I'm not certain, so I will say no more. I may be able to tell you something when I come back. I'm going off at once, so this is goodbye for the present." He got up and then he left. Right, so he leaves relatively quickly. Although isn't it the next day that he leaves in the books, not that night? I believe.
Yes. Yeah. Then he does not leave that night.
And then in the book, there's like just a couple pages of information and things that go on, maybe a page and a half. But this is the line where 17 years pass, essentially. For 3 years after the party, he had been away, he being Gandalf here. Then he paid Frodo a brief visit, and after taking a good look at him, he went off again. During the next year or two, he had turned up fairly often, coming unexpectedly after dusk and going off without warning. He would not discuss his own business and journeys and seemed chiefly interested in small news about Frodo's health and doings. Then suddenly his visits had ceased. It was over 9 years since Frodo had seen or heard of him, and he had begun to think that the wizard would never return and had given up all interest in the hobbits. But that evening, as Sam was walking home and twilight was fading, there came the once familiar tap on the study window. So that right there is 17 years. So we can say 17 years passed, but it's not like 17 years worth of prose passed in the Lord of the Rings. It's a very short amount of time that we learn about 17 years of time.
And why do you think Tolkien did that? Like, why does it need to be 17 years? It's just a long time, especially given the nature of everything, of the seriousness of the ring and all.
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't really thought about that in detail, about why why did he need that long? Is
I mean,
50,
we are
50
told
is 50 how 33 is when hobbits become adults.
yes.
50 is their number, 50 for hobbits? I don't think so,
I
right?
don't think so. No, not that I know of.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer. Do you have a great answer for that?
No, I don't. I mean, what we find out is that there's been some goings on with Gollum, him trailing Gollum. There's
Yeah.
been, of course, the scene that was shown where he delves into the archives trying to figure out if there's any clue to how to identify which ring would be the One Ring, and that's where he finds out about if you put the ring in fire, then the letters appear, and which he then goes through. That scene is pretty accurate to the book in the movies with Gandalf and Frodo when they test the ring and see the fire letters and everything. So, but it's not 17 years worth of stuff. And if this is so, I mean, obviously Gandalf's doing other things, right? So there's the whole fallout from the necromancer, and there's other stuff that's going on. But it's very odd. Like, it's a very long amount of time.
17 years. Tolkien does write that Frodo started looking more well preserved, I think, as well, and like he had an uncanny youth to him, that even just the proximity of having the ring near him. And so when Tolkien writes he was chiefly interested in small news about Frodo's health and doings, he was probably still trying to figure out, is this the ring, right? Is this the one thing? And he hadn't come to a final conclusion yet, or he was also in the midst of trying to, like, maybe it's best that it's in the small hands of the hobbits for now, because the long arm of Sauron, and as we'll eventually learn, Saruman is not going to reach this far because they don't expect it here.
You know, you're touching on something that I've wondered about for a long time, which is it's a very countercultural thing. It's something that I've attitude that I've run into most of the time. I've run into it in my life. It's been with academics, and I've run into a lot of medievalists. And the time frame, Gandalf seems unconcerned about the time frame. I mean, what's funny is, of course, from the start of the actual adventure of the Fellowship, when Frodo leaves the Shire, to the end of the adventure is less than a year. So you have 17 years of Gandalf nothing happening, followed by a flurry of world-shaking events and adventures in less than a year. And so it's very interesting, because so here's the argument that I've told myself in my head canon that might work, but it still doesn't. What it basically boils down to is a flaw in Gandalf. So Gandalf is an immortal, like he doesn't, or at least for all intents and purposes, he's immortal. Maybe he isn't, but he has been around for centuries and centuries, and the timeline that things work in is quite long. Like the time from the rise of Sauron to his putting himself forth after the last alliance, him putting himself forth as the necromancer, to the defeat of the necromancer, we're still talking centuries here. So Gandalf is probably not feeling the urgency, and he may suspect that that's the One Ring, but maybe he figures it out after a few years. But then he waits 15 years. Not a big deal to Gandalf. Not a big deal to the elves. But you know
who else? Yeah, to Frodo. Yeah, but do you know who else might have been a big deal too? Aragorn. And he was watching him at the same time, and probably seeing, like, is this the king? Is this who we are?
That's true. So Aragorn is 70 when at Bilbo's party, and he's 87 when the and so Aragorn's running around doing things, and so there's a lot of things to watch from Gandalf's perspective, and I just think his time frame is, like, we tend to have shorter time frames because our lives are so short and intense. But I think with Gandalf, while he can be very intense and short and take a lot of action in a brief period of time, he doesn't feel the need, like an elf. He doesn't feel the need to act hastily, and and especially about a matter so weighty. The one thing that I have a problem with, even my own headcanon with, is if once he does strongly suspect that it's the actual ring, him doing the test of it should have been immediate. It should have been, because at that point, once you have a test after reading Isildur, the archives in Minas Tirith, and coming across Isildur's journal, basically about what he did, what he discovered. It's so once you have an actual test, it is such a potentially dangerous object to leave unattended, even if it's in Hobbiton. That seems like a deep flaw. If Gandalf was like, yeah, but I got other things going on, so let me just hold off on that until I find my way back to Hobbiton. So remember, he's not been waylaid by Sauron or anything yet. So there's nothing really keeping him from the Shire if he wants to be there. So that's where I have the issue. Those are my thoughts.
This is oddly enough, this is one of the things that never bothered me too dramatically on the films, because you just don't really notice it that much in the books either.
Well, it's narratively, it's not any different, right? So you could say that 17 years passed, but narratively, Tolkien, like you said, takes 2 sentences to tell you that, and then we're back to the story. So
there's more changes in the lead up to Frodo and what's happening, with Crick Hollow and all that sort of stuff, and Merry going over there. Like, all those changes are far more dramatic than an entire removal of 17 years, which sounds kind of weird. That hey, we just removed 17 years. I mean, it's not like what the Rings of Power does is when they remove just millennia. But like you said,
they don't just remove millennia. They take time like a piece of Play-Doh and they wrap it around they do stupid tricks.
Yeah, but like you said, Gandalf he spent 17 years trying to figure this thing out. Let's not forget the second age of Middle Earth was like 3,500 years, somewhere around there, and the third age was 3,021 years. I want to say.
Yeah. Yeah, Bilbo's party takes place 3001 in the Third Age.
So from the defeat of Morgoth to the defeat of Sauron, that's like 7,000 to 6,500 years we're talking about. And so 17 years of that is a blip, essentially. So I'm sure Gandalf as the Maiar who has come to encourage and to what is the word they use? Not encourage. He's a
he kindles the hearts of men. And
yes, there you go.
So that's it.
So the question is, dropping off 17 years lore friendly?
Yeah, it is, because the lore drops it as well. That's my argument.
You could honestly change it, and it wouldn't
say exactly. Tolkien didn't care about those 17 years either. It's not like they dropped it. Jackson didn't drop 17 years of content. He only
okay, guys. I'm sure some of you are going to look at what happened in those 17 years by going through the histories of Middle Earth and the appendices here, but we're talking explicitly what was in the Lord of the Rings,
the narrative of the story, not the appendices.
The narrative of the story, right?
Yep.
All right. So yes, we both think it's lore friendly. All right. Does it make for better cinema? Well, yeah.
Yeah.
You can't say 17 years later. That's okay. This is a funny thing I saw. I don't remember which writers were saying when you do a writer's room for film or TV or anything like that. You never, when you're creating your storyboard, you never want to go from one scene to another scene and say, and then. You want to say therefore, or you want to say but. You want to have a connective word, right? So if you say and then, there's nothing you could say, and then this happened, and then this happened, right? This is a historical recap. No. You want to say therefore. And so that's 17 years. There's no therefore, there's no but. There's nothing that says this happened now and then therefore 17 years later, right? You'd have to actually show what's going on in those 17 years. And so I think you'd have to drop the 17 years, which is what Peter Jackson did. So yeah, you'd say yes too.
Now, what's interesting is he does show things happening in the intervening time.
The important things.
Like Gandalf's in Minas Tirith, clearly. We'll find out later. Obviously the first time viewers don't know that that's Minas Tirith, but so months have to have passed. So it's not like Jackson is saying, and then the next day, Jackson is saying that time passes, but he just doesn't show anything.
Right.
It definitely isn't 17 years.
Yeah, and also he captures Gollum in the meantime too. He and Aragorn, he captures Gollum.
Aragorn does.
Aragorn does. Yes. Aragorn captures Gollum in the Dead Marshes. Right. Yes. Okay. But that happens in the 17 years too, and that doesn't happen. Let me look this up here. So that happens in 3017. So that's only 3 years before they go off
16.
on their mission.
That's 16 years.
No. That's 3 years before they leave on the Fellowship. So it's three,
Okay.
isn't it? It happens in. Oh wait, no. In 2021 they leave. When is the? Now all my years, man, guys, I don't remember the years of all this here. Hold on. I
Yeah, we
got
should
this
have
here. Go.
a timeline up in front of us.
2018, 2017. Yeah. So yeah, it happens 2018, I believe, or 3018 is when they leave.
Yeah, not 3021, 3018. Yeah.
Yeah, 3018. Okay. Sorry. All these years are weird. I can't remember. All right. So yes, it makes for better cinema, removing 17 years, which still sounds really weird to me. Honestly, well, going back to the last episode, the last change we talked about, I disliked Gandalf not having a white flash more than I disliked them removing 17 years.
That's funny.
It just sounds kind of weird, but yeah.
You know how I always remember the year of the party was it's 3001, A Hobbit Particy.
A Hobbit Odyssey?
It's a fake word. It's a
3000.
It's a dad pun.
3001.
A Hobbit Particy.
Oh man. I don't even know what movie you're referring to. I've never heard of this 3001 movie. I'm joking. You're referring to 2001 by Stanley Kubrick, A Space Odyssey. I know.
Yep.
I know.
Thank you.
Which wasn't totally true. Just like the eugenics wars in Star Trek didn't happen. All right. Okay. So sorry. How much do you like the change on a scale of 1 to 5 without a 0? Michael?
It's pretty good. I'm in favor of the change. 4.0 flat.
4.0. Yeah, me too. It doesn't bother me at all whatsoever. It's
yeah.
I'm going.
Yeah, I'm not like happy about it. I don't think it improves like we were talking about the Whispering Ring when John Carswell was on and stuff. I actually think that makes the ring better. That in a cinematic retelling, it's better. This isn't better. It's good. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I think what I found in ranking and rating these things here, Michael, is that I am much more living on the edges of the extremes than you are. When it comes to me disliking and liking things, like when it comes to some of the dislikes, I'm gonna be dropping down to ones pretty fast. Yeah. All right, guys. That's how much we like it. This was a positive week. These episodes of these two changes, Party Time and 17 Years Lost, we found them positive, and I think that follows in how when I first saw the films, I had a much more positive feeling upon leaving the Shire than I did upon leaving, say, Rivendell or Lothlorien. Those were dramatic moments of change for me that I didn't appreciate after seeing the Fellowship of the Ring when I first saw the films. So there you have it, guys. Any final thoughts on these changes?
Nope.
No.
We're starting to get into the meat. But we are going to take a break, as Jonathan mentioned. We are going to go back to Tolkien, back to the books, back to the books, back to the books.
We might do one more episode of Film Changes. We're not quite sure what the schedule holds because we want to get 3 of us talking about what I think is going to be a part of Unfinished Tales. We're not going to go through some of the Narn Ihin Hurin, the Tale of Thorns, the Children of Hurin, because we talked a lot about that in the Silmarillion already, but some stuff that we haven't done yet, which would be really interesting and fun to go through. So I know some of you have been asking for us to get back into actual Tolkien writing, not complaining about Peter Jackson's movies, which is what some of you think we're doing. We're just talking about the differences. So I'm happy to get back into it too. We'll see that early next year, probably sometime in the middle of January. But since it's almost next year already, I keep thinking about that because we're recording before Christmas, and yet this is being published after Christmas. I'm so sorry. My brain is off. So it's going to be like in the next couple of weeks, guys. But we're going to jump into our extended podcast. We're going to talk more about Frodo and Bilbo sharing a birthday and how that's not portrayed in the films. And if they took 17 years and they tried to add that to the films, what could they have done? What would that have looked like? How do you execute that on? Let's talk about let's do it on the small screen, right, on the streaming, because that's kind of where we're going to if they were going to do these kinds of long form things. How do you execute that and still show that 17 years have gone by and make it appropriate? So we're going to check that out in our extended podcast, which you can get to by becoming a member, thewondering.com/member. First month is free. It's $4 a month. Or you can become a sponsor like Harrison, Adam, and Lynn, and they go above and beyond and help us out even more. So thanks to them. And
we love them. We love you all. And goodbye, freeloaders.